The folding chairs in the high school gymnasium creaked as parents shifted, murmuring anxiously among themselves. The smell of floor polish still lingered from the janitor's morning sweep, but the air was heavy now with tension. Banners that usually hung proudly for basketball games seemed out of place over the crowd's restless energy. At the front of the room, the principal adjusted the microphone. His voice carried through the echo of the gym. "Thank you all for coming tonight. We're here to introduce a new addition to our faculty. Please welcome Ms. Evelyn Johnson, who will be teaching English literature this fall." A young black woman in her early 30s stepped onto the stage. Her posture was confident, her smile polite but measured. She wore a simple blazer and skirt, her hair neatly tied back. Evelyn carried herself with the calm assurance of someone who had worked for years to stand where she stood. But the applause never came. Instead, a murmur spread through the crowd. A man in the front row shook his head, whispering loudly enough to be heard, "This isn't right. We need someone our kids can relate to." Another parent, a woman with her arms crossed tight against her chest, stood abruptly. "Why wasn't the community consulted? My daughter doesn't need to be part of some social experiment." The gym erupted. Voices overlapped, rising with anger. "This is not what we want for our school. She won't fit in here. You are making a mistake." Evelyn stood still, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. She let the noise wash over her, each word sharp but not unfamiliar. She had heard them before, in different forms, in different places. Doubt disguised as concern. Prejudice cloaked in tradition. The principal tapped the microphone, trying to quiet the room. Please, let's give Ms. Johnson a chance to speak." The voices quieted it into a simmering silence. Dozens of eyes stared up at Evelyn, some filled with skepticism, others with outright hostility. Evelyn took a breath, her heart steady, and stepped forward to the microphone. The microphone hummed softly as Evelyn adjusted it, her fingertips brushing against the cool metal. The gymnasium lights cast a pale glow on her face, but her voice, when it came, was warm and steady. "Good evening," she began, her eyes moving across the crowd. "I know some of you are worried. I know I'm not who you expected." A ripple of murmurs answered her words, but Evelyn didn't flinch. She stood rooted, her presence calm, her tone measured. "I didn't come here to make headlines," she continued. "I came here because I believe in the power of education. I believe that literature, stories, voices from the past and present, can shape how young people see themselves in the world. And I believe your children deserve a teacher who won't just hand them books, but who will teach them to think, to question, to dream." For a moment, the room was quiet. Parents who had shouted only minutes earlier now stared at her, surprised by the confidence in her tone. One man in the middle row scoffed, folding his arms. "Fine words. But can you actually teach? Our kids need discipline, not speeches." Evelyn met his eyes directly. "Yes, I can teach. I've done it in schools with fewer resources, in classrooms with twice as many students. And those children learned, not just because of me, but because someone believed in them when others didn't. I intend to do the same here. For every single student." Her words echoed against the high gym walls. Some parents shifted uncomfortably, as though unsure whether to keep resisting or to acknowledge her poise. Others whispered to their neighbors, their tone softer now, less certain. Evelyn let the silence linger before she closed. "You don't have to trust me today. But give me a chance, and let your children show you what they're capable of. Their success will be my answer." When she stepped back from the podium, the gym was hushed. Not approving, not welcoming, but no longer a chorus of protest. The battle wasn't won, but a seed had been planted. The first day of school arrived with the usual chaos, lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking on polished floors, students chattering in hallways that buzzed like beehives. Evelyn stood at the front of room 204, arranging her desk neatly, pencils aligned, a stack of books waiting on the corner, and her lesson plan folded with precision. When the bell rang, the students shuffled in. Their eyes flicked to her, then away, then back again. Some whispered behind their hands. A few rolled their eyes, already carrying their parents' doubts into the classroom with them. Evelyn greeted each student with a smile, writing her name on the whiteboard in clear, steady letters. "Ms. Johnson, English Literature. Good morning," she said brightly. "This year, we're not just going to read stories, we're going to live them, question them, and maybe even write a few of our own." A hand shot up immediately. A boy in the back, smirking. "Are we still doing Shakespeare? Or just, books you like?" Laughter rippled through the room. Evelyn smiled, unfazed. Yes, Shakespeare is still on the menu. But so is Angie Thomas. And Jason Reynolds. And a few others who speak to the world you're growing up in right now. The laughter quieted. A few heads tilted with curiosity. She moved around the room, handing out a short poem for them to read aloud. Not a dusty classic, but a contemporary piece about identity and courage. At first, the students read mechanically, voices flat. But when Evelyn asked, "Who here has ever felt like this writer? Like you were underestimated before you even opened your mouth?" Several hands went up, hesitantly at first, then more. For the first time that morning, the room grew alive. By the end of the period, students who had slouched in their chairs were sitting upright, debating lines from the poem. A girl who hadn't spoken in weeks offered an insight that made her classmates nod in agreement. When the final bell rang, some lingered at the door, still talking about the poem. Evelyn stood at her desk, heart swelling. It was just one class, just one day, but she could feel it. The shift had begun. By October, the whispers had grown into letters. The principal's inbox was stacked with complaints, parents insisting Evelyn wasn't a good fit, demanding she be replaced. At PTA meetings, a handful of voices still dominated the room. "She's changing the curriculum without approval," one father snapped. "My daughter says they spend too much time on feelings instead of real literature," another mother complained. The principal, weary but cautious, defended her. "Ms. Johnson is following state guidelines. And test scores are already showing improvement." The parents weren't convinced. They folded their arms, unwilling to let go of the prejudice beneath their words. Meanwhile, in room 204, Evelyn kept working. Her students were beginning to thrive in ways no meeting agenda could capture. She introduced debate circles, where shy kids who once hid in the back now argued passionately about themes in novels. She encouraged them to draw parallels between Romeo and Juliet and the dramas of high school friendships. She connected Maya Angelou's words to their own struggles and dreams. One afternoon, the class entered a citywide essay contest. At first, only a few volunteered. Evelyn nudged them gently, "Your voices matter. The world needs to hear them." Soon, half the class submitted essays. 2 weeks later, 3 of her students won top awards. Their names appeared in the local paper, smiling awkwardly in photographs while clutching certificates. That night, some of the same parents who had filed complaints sat at their kitchen tables, staring at their children's faces in the newspaper. Pride flickered alongside confusion. They had wanted Evelyn gone, yet here were their children, succeeding because of her. The conflict wasn't over. The letters continued, the protests simmered. But Evelyn had something stronger now, proof. And her students, once skeptical, now looked at her not as an outsider, but as their teacher. By spring, the energy in the school had changed. What began in Evelyn's classroom was spreading down the halls, into the library, even into after-school activities. It started small. She offered to supervise a reading club during lunch. At first, only a handful of students showed up, nervously clutching paperbacks. Within a month, the group had doubled, then tripled, spilling out of the library corner into the main room. They weren't just reading, they were talking, laughing, connecting in ways that hadn't happened before. Soon, Evelyn launched a debate team. She coached students in the art of argument, teaching them to research, listen, and respond with respect. When they entered their first regional tournament, no one expected them to win a single round. Instead, they walked away with second place, in the confidence that they belonged on that stage. She didn't stop there. With a grant she applied for on her own, Evelyn organized a school theater program. Students who had never thought of themselves as performers built sets, designed costumes, and memorized lines. On opening night, the auditorium filled with families who saw their children shine under the stage lights. Parents who had once doubted her sat in the audience, clapping louder than anyone else. Some avoided her eyes in the hallway the next morning. Others, quietly, offered thanks. The faculty noticed too. Teachers from math, science, and history stopped by her classroom to see how she kept her students so engaged. The principal began inviting her to planning meetings, not just as a teacher, but as an advisor. Evelyn never boasted. She kept her focus where it belonged, on the students. But word was spreading beyond the walls of the school. A local education magazine ran a short feature on her debate team. A state superintendent mentioned her reading program in a speech. She was no longer just the new hire parents had tried to block. Evelyn Johnson was becoming the heart of the school. 2 years after Evelyn first stepped into room 204, the school looked almost unrecognizable. The once struggling halls now buzzed with life, students rushing to rehearsals, debate practices, writing workshops, and community projects. Bulletin boards overflowed with newspaper clippings and ribbons from competitions. It wasn't long before outsiders began to notice. First came a state award for innovative teaching practices. The following year, the school's debate team, coached by Evelyn, won a national championship. Then the theater program received a grant from a prestigious arts foundation. The crowning moment came when the U.S. Department of Education recognized the school as a National School of Excellence, citing its transformational leadership and groundbreaking student achievement programs. The principal stood proudly on stage during the ceremony in Washington, D.C., but he made it clear to reporters, this recognition belongs to our staff, our students, and especially to Ms. Evelyn Johnson, whose vision has reshaped our school. Back home, banners were hung across the entrance, "Congratulations! National Award winners." Local news crews arrived with cameras, interviewing wide-eyed students who eagerly credited their teacher. "She made us believe we could do more," one said. "She pushed us, but she never gave up on us," another added. Even the parents who had once led protests now sat in the audience, watching their children beam with pride. Some clapped harder than anyone else, as though to drown out the memory of their earlier opposition. And Evelyn? She stood quietly at the edge of the stage, smiling at her students, her heart swelling not from the spotlight, but from seeing them shine. She hadn't just earned a place in the school. She had lifted the entire community to heights no one had imagined. The school auditorium was filled to the brim, every seat taken, families spilling into the aisles. Students stood on stage with medals around their necks, holding trophies and certificates, their smiles shining as bright as the lights above. A banner stretched across the back curtain, "National School of Excellence, celebrating our students." Applause thundered through the room as the principal stepped aside and gestured toward Evelyn. She walked to the podium, modest as always, her blazer simple, her notes tucked under one arm. "Tonight isn't about me," she began, her voice steady. "It's about them, the students who worked harder than they ever thought they could. The students who turned obstacles into opportunities. And the families who supported them every step of the way." Her eyes swept across the crowd, pausing just long enough to notice a few familiar faces. Parents who had once stood in the gym 2 years ago, demanding she not be hired, now sat with tears in their eyes. Some clutched programs tightly, as if afraid to look up. After the ceremony, as the crowd spilled into the hallways, one of those parents, a woman who had once shouted the loudest, approached Evelyn. Her voice trembled. "I was wrong," she admitted. "I didn't see who you really were. I only saw my own fears. I'm sorry." Evelyn held her gaze for a moment, then offered a small smile. "It's not about me. It's about your children. They proved what they're capable of. And that's what matters most." The woman nodded, tears brimming, before stepping aside. As Evelyn walked out into the cool evening air, she heard the laughter of her students behind her, echoing through the open doors. She tilted her head back toward the stars, a quiet pride swelling in her chest. They had tried to stop her. But together, she and her students had built something undeniable, something that would outlast prejudice, something rooted in hope. And in the glow of that night, Evelyn knew, this was only the beginning.